Hello and welcome to our new lecture of D.H. Lawrence Sons and Lovers. This lecture is going to discuss the test on Miriam and passion. Without further ado, let's get started. The test on Miriam. Inspired by Clara's advice, Paul realizes that he must go back to Miriam. He reflects that the problem between the two of them may have been caused by the lack of sexuality in their relationship. He feels no aversion to her. Rather, he feels that his desire for her has been overwhelmed by his stronger shyness and virginity. He begins to spend more time with Miriam again, much to the dismay of his mother. One day he begins a serious discussion with her about marriage and asks her if she thinks they have been too fierce in their purity towards each other. Miriam feels that her submission to Paul will be a sacrifice, and it is a sacrifice she is willing to make for him. He begins to treat his relationship with her as a romantic relationship. Miriam goes to stay at her grandmother's cottage and Paul visits her often. One holiday, he goes to spend the whole day with her. She prepared dinner. For that day, they feel as though they live together in that cottage. Paul feels that he is sacrificing Miriam and that she is allowing herself to be sacrificed because she loves him so much. During the next week, he asks her why she is so hesitant towards him, and she replies that she feels it is not quite right because they are not married. He tells her that he would like to marry her, but she feels they are too young. He begins to feel a sense of failure and to draw somewhat away from Miriam again. He begins to spend more time with his men friends and also once again with Clara. Paul tells his mother that he will break off with Miriam because he does not love her and does not want to marry her. She is somewhat surprised and encourages him to do whatever he thinks is best. He goes to Miriam and tells her they should break off because he does not want to marry. She's upset, tells him he is a child of 4, and tells him that she knew all along that it would not work out between them. This upsets Paul, and he begins to feel that she has deceived him. She had only pretended to love him. They part, each full of bitterness. Here we arrive at the commentary on this chapter. Partly because of Paul's has more frequent visits to Miriam, Mrs. Morel begins to give up on him. She feels that his mind is made up and that nothing would persuade him to change his mind and restore his loyalties to her. Lawrence's language seems to be deliberately vague on the subject of Paul's Miriam physical love. This vagueness of language is largely due to the strict public morality that characterizes society when the novel was written. Lawrence's books, despite his efforts at vagueness, often produced horror. Many of them were even banned because of their sexual content. Chapter 12: Passion. Paul begins to spend much of his time with his mother again. They go to the Isle of Wight for a holiday, and Mrs. Morel has a bad fainting fit caused by too much walking. She recovers, but Paul still feels anxious about her condition. Paul returns to spending a great deal of time with Clara. He tells her that he has broken off with Miriam. One Saturday evening, Paul and Clara go for a walk and he kisses her. Then upon leaving, he is suddenly consumed by passion for her and cannot wait for Monday to come so that he can see her again. On Monday, they go walking in the afternoon and takes a tram out to the country. They walk near a river and decide to go down to the bank. But because of the rain, the path is gone. They encounter 2 fishermen while walking along the river bank and keep walking until they find a secluded clearing slightly above the river level. After they leave, they climb up to the top again and they stop while Paul cleans off Clara's boots. She distracts him with kisses, but he finally finishes. They stop for tea at the house of an old woman who gives Clara some flowers. Paul returns home and tells his mother that he has been with Clara. She cautions him because Clara is a married woman and he tells her not to worry. He asks if she would like to meet Clara and decides to invite her to tea at their house on Sunday afternoon. When Clara comes to tea, she gets along well with his mother. Morel also meets her and impresses her with his politeness. Clara and Paul are in the garden looking at the flowers when Miriam arrives to say hello to Clara. She sees them together and feels as though they are married. Mrs. Morel is not pleased to see Miriam, whom she still dislikes. All three go to chapel, and afterward, when Paul and Clara are walking home, she asks him if he will give Miriam up. He tells her that he thinks he will always be friends with Miriam, and she draws away from him slightly and mocks him, telling him to run after Miriam. He gets angry with her and kisses her in rage. They go off into the field, where they look at the lights of the town until Clara realizes she must go to make her train. They run and she just makes the train. The next week, Paul takes Clara to the theater. She tells him to wear his evening suit, and she arrives dressed in a green evening dress. After the play, Paul realizes that he has missed his train, and Clara tells him to come home with her instead of walking. They arrive and Clara's mother, Mrs. Radford, makes fun of their fancy clothes. Paul and Clara sit up playing cribbage and Mrs. Radford waits up for them. Finally, Paul goes to bed. Paul's relationship with his mother also continues to be central. Miriam knows Paul well enough to understand that whether he has told his mother about Clara is an indication of the seriousness of his feeling for her. This illustrates the way that his mother is still the most important woman to him, and the degree to which other events in his life can be understood by the way that they relate to her. It is also very important that Clara gets along well with his mother, as Clara understands reading the meeting because she realized Paul's intense love for his mother. Last but not least, we come to the quotations. We start with the first quotation. She would submit religiously to the sacrifice he should have her, and at the thought that her whole body clenches itself involuntarily, hard as if against something, but life forced her through this gate of suffering. 2. And she would submit. At any rate, it would give him what he wanted, which was her deepest wish. The second quotation will say, love should give a sense of freedom, not of prison. In the second quotation, Paul tries to convince Clara to enter a physical relationship with him, despite the fact that she has already married. He claims they belong together because they were both stifled by their previous relationships, he with Miriam and her with Baxter Dawes. This is the end of our lecture, and I hope to see you in the next one.